Right. So it's completely unsurprising because let's set out exactly what's happening here. The United States and Israel are attempting to coerce Iran into, in the United States' case, primarily first opening the Strait of Hormuz. We've seemed to have stopped talking about regime change. And in Israel's case, it's not entirely clear, but what the Israeli press is reporting is they basically seem to be pushing for a failed state, for essentially the collapse of the Iranian government. From the Iranians' perspective, what they're sort of saying is, hey, let's say we get a ceasefire. The Israelis and the Americans can just do this again in 6 months. The only tool we have to push back against them is the Strait of Hormuz. Why would we give up control of the strait just to buy 6 months of peace when this could just happen all over again with 6 months from now? This doesn't make any sense, right? The United States is attempting to coerce the Iranians essentially into committing suicide because they're not going to give up their only tool of protection against American and Israeli strikes. I don't see how this is going to change.
So this brings back, I guess, the question people are asking on day one. What is the off-ramp for President Trump and this administration and the U.S. and Israel here for this war?
I mean, I would say the off-ramp is that at this point, they need to figure out some way to provide guarantees that this will not happen again, right? Some sort of a deal that the terms that have kind of been put out on the table basically look exactly like the Iran nuclear deal that Trump discarded in his first term, which is, ironic but unsurprising. But that's not the way the pressure is going, right? All of the dynamics of war, this is why you don't get into wars when you can avoid it, right? Why a war should never be the last choice, not the first one, because all the dynamics keep pushing towards escalation, right? Trump is putting out these tweets and increasing the range of targets he's hitting, and threatening to bomb Iran back into the Stone Age and go after electricity plants and desalination plants, and doing those things to inflict harm on the civilian population, and particularly water supplies, is a war crime. There's just no question about that. So all of those things are going. And at the same time, the Iranians have retaliatory options, right? They can use their own drones and their own missiles to go after desalination plants in the other Gulf countries, all of which, many of which, by the way, are much more dependent on desalination than Iran is. That's actually an asymmetric threat on the side of the Iranians. And if I were a Gulf country, I'd be really, really concerned about that.
What do you make of the news that we have seen more ships transiting through the Strait of Hormuz? 21 ships, according to Bloomberg reporting. Iraq, India, China's governments have negotiated passage for their ships. So it's not that traffic has returned to normal, but there is some traffic. And Iran is kind of instituting the system where these different ships pay tolls. We don't know the terms of these specific ships that have moved through, but there is something looking like some traffic has returned.
Yeah, so that's actually the Iranians improving their position, right? Like, not only is some flow through the straits, it's flow through the states at the discretion of Iran, which was not the situation before the war. And just to make this worse, the threat we are making is that we will destroy Iran's civilian economy and inflict enormous harm on its population if they don't do what we want. But if we destroy Iran's civilian economy, then revenues from the straits will become even more important to Iran. They will become completely critical to rebuilding after the war, which means that if we do this, we increase their incentive to maintain control of the straits, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid.
What do you expect? Are you surprised, Gautam, that we've heard relatively little from the U.S. Congress, either party, about this war in Iran?
I'm certainly not surprised that the Republicans haven't said anything. They have continued their pattern of being completely subservient to the president. From the Democrats, part of this, I think, was the speed with which the war began, but it's been a month now, and I think they're kind of out of excuses. It's not clear to me what's happening here. This war is deeply unpopular. It is getting more unpopular with time. Other than maybe some donor pressure from some donors who are in favor of the war, if I were a Democrat who was thinking about 2026 or 2028, I'd be way ahead, way out in front on this is a disaster and it needs to end. And the party is essentially at this point committing political malpractice by not committing to that.
Yeah, they're kind of absent completely here in speaking up. Speaking of speaking up, the president will be making an address at 1 p.m. today. Gautam, what are you I mean, we know everything he said. And in fact, his address to the American public last week kind of laid out every single option available to him. What would surprise you from his comments today?
I mean, what would surprise me is a recognition that escalation is not going to get him what he wants, right? So, with all of this, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So far, what they have seen is they are trying to force the Iranians to get to some better strategic outcome for the United States. And the only tool they've had essentially is airstrikes and making threats of even worse airstrikes. And it's just very, very clear from the strategic dynamics here that is not going to work.